Sometimes the smallest details reveal the biggest truths. When 16-year-old James Washington tried to hide his feet under the Family Feud podium, he thought no one would notice. But Steve Harvey notices everything. And when the cameras accidentally captured what this teenager was desperately trying to hide, it led to a moment that would change not just James's life, but the way America thinks about dignity, pride, and what it really means to lift each other up. This isn't just a story about shoes. This is a story about a young man's courage to show up even when he felt he didn't belong, and a host who understood that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is meet someone exactly where they are. The Washington family had been living paycheck to paycheck for as long as James could remember. His mother, Sandra, worked 2 jobs, cleaning office buildings at night and stocking shelves at a grocery store during the day. She never complained, never made James feel like their struggles were his fault. But he saw the worry lines around her eyes, the way she counted every dollar twice, the way she went without so he could have what he needed for school. James was a good kid, honor roll student, basketball team captain, the kind of teenager who helped elderly neighbors carry groceries and always said yes ma'am and no sir. But being a good kid doesn't protect you from the reality of worn-out clothes, empty refrigerators, and shoes that have been duct-taped so many times they're more tape than leather. James had been wearing the same pair of basketball shoes for 3 years. They were hand-me-downs to begin with, passed down from a cousin who'd outgrown them. Now they were held together with prayer, determination, and about half a roll of gray duct tape. The call about Family Feud came at the perfect time and the worst time. Perfect because the $20,000 prize money could change everything for James and his mother. Worst because James knew that appearing on national television meant people would see him, really see him, including the shoes that had become his daily source of shame. But Sandra was so excited, so hopeful, that James couldn't bear to disappoint her. They were going to Los Angeles, and they were going to win. The night before the taping, James spent 2 hours in the bathroom, carefully cleaning his shoes with an old toothbrush, trying to make the duct tape look intentional, artistic even. He practiced walking in a way that might hide the worst of the damage, practiced sitting so his feet would be hidden under the podium. His mother had scraped together enough money to buy him a new shirt for the show, and he was grateful, but the contrast between his crisp new shirt and his disintegrating shoes felt like wearing a tuxedo jacket over torn jeans. The Family Feud studio was everything James had imagined and more. Bright lights, excited audience, the energy that comes with live television. Steve Harvey commanded the room with his presence, his perfectly tailored suit, his confident swagger. Everything about him screamed success, achievement, the kind of life that James dreamed about, but couldn't quite imagine for himself. As James stood at the family podium next to his mother, aunt, and 2 cousins, he felt simultaneously thrilled and terrified. This was his shot, but what if he wasn't good enough? What if people looked at him and saw everything he was trying to hide? Steve noticed James immediately during the family introductions. There was something about the teenager's posture that caught his attention. Confident but guarded, proud but protective. When Steve approached the Washington family podium, James straightened his shoulders and met his eyes directly. "And you must be James," Steve said, reading from his index card. 16 years old, honor roll student, basketball team captain. "That's impressive, young man." James smiled, the kind of smile that lit up his whole face. "Thank you, Mr. Harvey. It's an honor to meet you, sir." Steve's eyebrows raised slightly. It wasn't often that teenagers called him sir with such genuine respect. "The honor's mine, son. You ready to help your family win some money today?" "Yes, sir, we're ready." But even as James spoke confidently, Steve noticed something. The way the teenager kept shifting his weight, the way he positioned himself slightly behind the podium, the way his eyes would dart down occasionally as if checking something. Steve had been hosting long enough to recognize when someone was uncomfortable, and something about James's behavior suggested he was carrying more than just pre-game nerves. The game began with the Washington family facing the Rodriguez family from San Antonio. The energy was high, the questions were fun, and James proved to be an asset to his team. When Steve asked name something teenagers spend too much money on, James confidently answered, shoes, earning the number 2 spot on the board and a hearty laugh from the audience. Steve grinned. You sound like you speak from experience, young man. James laughed, but there was something in his expression that suggested the comment hit closer to home than anyone realized. Subscribe and leave a comment because what happens next will show you what real strength looks like. The Washington family was doing exceptionally well, leading by a comfortable margin as they headed into the final round. James had been their secret weapon, providing smart answers and maintaining his composure under the bright lights. His mother beamed with pride every time he stepped up to the podium, and Steve found himself genuinely impressed by the teenager's quick thinking and respectful demeanor. As they moved into fast money, James's mother Sandra went first, scoring a respectable 56 points. James needed just 44 more points to win the $20,000. The questions were straightforward, and James was ready. This was it. This was their moment to change their lives. James, you need 44 points to win $20,000 for your family, Steve announced. You ready, son? James gripped the podium, his knuckles tight but his voice steady. I'm ready, Mr. Harvey. Let's do this. 20 seconds on the clock. Name something you check before leaving the house. Keys. James responded immediately. Good answer. Name something people complain about at restaurants. Slow service. Name something you might buy at a gas station. Snacks. Good. Name something people spend too much money on. James hesitated for just a moment, and again that shadow crossed his face. Clothes. Name something you hope never breaks. Your heart, James said softly. The answers were solid. The points were adding up, and when the final tally was revealed, the Washington family had won. Confetti fell from the ceiling. Celebration music played, and Sandra Washington hugged her son with tears streaming down her face. They had done it. They had actually won. For a family that counted every penny, it was life-changing money. But in the excitement of the moment, something happened that James had been dreading. As he jumped up from his position at the podium, celebrating with his family, his feet became visible to the cameras for the first time. The bright studio lights illuminated every piece of duct tape, every worn spot, every careful repair that had been made to keep his shoes functional, and the cameras, trained to capture every moment of celebration, caught it all. James noticed immediately. His celebration stopped mid-jump, his face flushed with embarrassment, and he quickly sat back down, trying to tuck his feet back under the podium. But it was too late. The moment had been captured, broadcast to millions of viewers, and James felt like disappearing into the floor. All the joy of winning, all the pride of his family's success, was suddenly overshadowed by the shame of having his poverty exposed on national television. Steve saw it all. The moment of pure joy on James's face, followed by the crushing embarrassment when he realized his shoes had been seen. The way the teenager tried to make himself smaller, the way his shoulders slumped as if he was carrying a weight too heavy for someone his age. And in that instant, Steve Harvey made a decision that would define this moment and change James's life forever. Hold up, Steve said, stopping the celebration music with a gesture. Hold up, everybody. The studio fell quiet. The confetti stopped falling, and all eyes turned to Steve, who was walking directly toward James. Son, what size shoe do you wear? The question hung in the air like thunder. James looked up at Steve, confusion and mortification clear on his face. Sir, your shoe size, James. What is it? James's voice was barely above a whisper. 11.
11. Same as me.
Steve turned to the production crew. I need a commercial break, right now. Behind the scenes, something unprecedented was happening. Steve Harvey, who had hosted thousands of hours of television, who understood timing and pace and the importance of maintaining energy, had just stopped a winning celebration to focus on one teenager's feet. The producers were confused, the audience was puzzled, but Steve was determined. During the commercial break, Steve did something that no one in that studio expected. He sat down on the edge of the stage and began untying his own shoes. They were expensive, clearly custom-made, the kind of shoes that cost more than many people's monthly rent. And he took them off, right there in front of everyone. James, Steve called, still sitting on the stage with his socks showing. Come here, son. James approached hesitantly, still trying to process what was happening. You and I wear the same size, and I've got more shoes than I know what to do with. But you know what I don't have enough of? James shook his head. Young men like you. Young men who show up, who work hard, who take care of their families, who say yes, sir, and no, ma'am, and who understand that respect and character matter more than anything you can put on your feet. Steve stood up and handed his shoes to James. These are yours now, but I want you to understand something. These shoes didn't make me successful. They're just the reward for success. The real power, the real strength that comes from in here, he pointed to James's chest, and from up here, he pointed to his head. You've already got everything you need to succeed. These shoes are just going to help you walk the path with a little more confidence. The audience, which had been watching in stunned silence, erupted in applause. But this wasn't polite television applause. This was the sound of people recognizing something profound when they saw it. This was the sound of witnessing genuine human kindness in action. But Steve wasn't finished. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his personal business card. James, I want you to have this too. Not because you won today, but because you've already shown me that you're a winner. You showed up when you could have made excuses. You represented your family with pride when you could have been embarrassed. You spoke with respect when you could have been casual. That tells me everything I need to know about your character. James took the shoes and the business card with trembling hands. They were the most expensive things he had ever held, but more importantly, they represented something he had never experienced before. Someone seeing his worth despite his circumstances. Someone believing in his potential regardless of his current situation. Mr. Harvey, James said, his voice thick with emotion, I don't know how to thank you. Steve put his hand on the teenager's shoulder. You thank me by continuing to be the young man your mother raised you to be. You thank me by remembering that where you come from doesn't determine where you're going. And you thank me by helping someone else when you're in a position to do so. When the cameras came back from commercial break, James was wearing Steve's shoes. They fit perfectly, and as he stood there next to his family celebrating their victory, he stood a little taller, walked a little straighter, carried himself like the champion he had always been inside. The episode aired 3 months later and immediately went viral. Not because of the game, not because of the money, but because of those 2 minutes when Steve Harvey demonstrated what leadership really looks like. The clip was shared millions of times, spawning countless discussions about dignity, respect, and the power of small gestures to change lives. But the real impact was just beginning. Inspired by what they had witnessed, viewers began reaching out to the show with donations of shoes, clothes, and school supplies for families in need. Steve's gesture had sparked something much larger than anyone could have anticipated. Within a month, Shoes for Success was established as an official foundation, providing not just footwear but mentorship, scholarships, and support for young people facing economic hardship. James Washington became the foundation's first official recipient, and eventually its most powerful spokesperson. The shoes Steve gave him lasted through his junior and senior years of high school. through his graduation as valedictorian, through his full-ride basketball scholarship to State University, and through his college graduation with honors. He kept them even when they became too worn to wear, displaying them in his dorm room and later in his apartment as a reminder of the day someone believed in him. The business card Steve had given him was framed on his wall, but more importantly, the phone number on it was real. Steve called James every few months throughout high school and college, checking on his progress, offering advice, and serving as the kind of mentor every young person deserves. When James graduated from college with a degree in business and a minor in social work, the first call he made wasn't to his mother or his girlfriend. It was to Steve Harvey. "Mr. Harvey," James said through tears of joy, "I did it. I graduated." "I never doubted you for a second," Steve replied. "Your success was never in question. You had everything you needed that day we met. The shoes were just a symbol." "What now?" James asked. "Now you keep climbing. Now you reach back and help someone else up. Now you become the person for someone else that I tried to be for you." James took those words to heart. After graduation, he returned to his hometown and started a youth mentorship program, focusing on teenagers from low-income families who showed potential but lacked resources. He called it "Walk Tall," and its motto, borrowed from something Steve had told him, was simple: "Character is your foundation, everything else is just details." Steve Harvey has said in interviews that giving James his shoes was one of the most impactful moments of his career. "People ask me about my funniest Family Feud moments, my most surprising answers, my biggest wins," he explains. "But that day with James taught me something about television and about life. Sometimes the most important thing you can do is pause everything and focus on one person who needs to know they matter." The shoes that started it all now sit in Steve's office, returned to him by James as a graduation gift. They're scuffed and worn from years of wear, but Steve keeps them as a reminder of what's possible when someone sees potential instead of problems, when someone chooses to build up rather than overlook, when someone understands that dignity is not a luxury item, it's a basic human need. Every Family Feud episode now ends with Steve's signature sign-off, but he's added something new. After reminding viewers to keep your family close and your faith closer, he adds, "And remember, we rise by lifting others. Look for ways to help someone walk a little taller today." The Shoes for Success Foundation has now provided footwear and support to over 50,000 young people across the country. James Washington, now 23, serves on its board of directors while completing his master's degree in social work. He speaks regularly at schools and community centers, sharing his story and reminding young people that their current circumstances don't define their future possibilities. And Steve Harvey? He learned that sometimes the most powerful moments in television happen not when you follow the script, but when you recognize that there's a human being standing in front of you who needs to know they're seen, valued, and worthy of investment. He learned that dignity can't be bought, but it can be restored. And he learned that sometimes the smallest gesture, sharing something as simple as a pair of shoes, can change the trajectory of someone's entire life. The moment James tried to hide his feet under that podium lasted less than 5 seconds. But its impact, its reminder of what compassion looks like in action, will last forever. Because that's what happens when someone decides that a young person's dignity matters more than maintaining the show's schedule. That's what happens when a successful man remembers what it felt like to need help and chooses to be the help he once needed. Share and subscribe. Make sure this story of dignity, respect, and the power of believing in someone's potential is never forgotten.